The 30th of January, 1933, Berlin. Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany, and the political order created after the First World War starts to collapse. Power concentrates rapidly, opposition is silenced, and the new regime begins reshaping the state through fear, loyalty, and exclusion. Political enemies are arrested, communist organizations are dismantled, and those labeled threats to the Nazi regime are removed systematically. Even figures from the traditional elite, including members of the German aristocracy, are subject to repression. As Nazi authority consolidates, the courts enforce control. Capital punishment is reinstated and carried out behind prison walls. At dawn, inside Germany's prisons, one man steps forward. He prepares the guillotine or the hand axe, calculates distance and timing, and carries out the sentence without hesitation. His name is Karl Greppler. Franz Friedrich Karl Greppler was born on the 22nd of February, 1868 in the city of Magdeburg, then part of the Kingdom of Prussia, which played a significant role in the unification of Germany in 1871 and was a major constituent of the German Empire until its dissolution in 1918. Karl was the son of Heinrich Gröpler, a railway worker and general service laborer, and his wife Auguste. Raised in a working-class household, Karl Greppler grew up in an environment shaped by discipline, manual labor, and modest means. He was later described as a broad-shouldered and powerfully built man, with a reddish moustache and a closely cropped, military-style haircut that gave him a stern appearance. In his early adult years, Greppler did not immediately settle into a single profession. He first trained as a musician, then spent 5 years working as a postal employee. Seeking greater financial stability, he later learned the trade of horse butcher and eventually ran a steam laundry in Magdeburg. The business did not provide sufficient income, however, and Greppler began looking for additional sources of employment. This search led him to the Prussian justice system. Greppler initially worked as the chief assistant to Lorenz Schwyz, the principal Prussian executioner. When Alvin Engelhardt, the Prussian executioner at the time, was summarily dismissed in 1906 due to irregularities in his accounting, Greppler took over his duties. From that moment on, he became one of the last executioners in Germany to carry out beheadings with a hand axe, also known as the Richtbeil, a specialized tool designed specifically for executions. Depending on local circumstances and prison facilities, he also operated the guillotine, known in Germany as the Fallbeil. Greppler approached his work with ritual, discipline, and a deeply held religious conviction. On one occasion prior to an execution, he told a prison officer that he believed in God and could not perform his duties otherwise. He cited biblical commandments to justify capital punishment, arguing that the law reflected divine order. In his view, executions were not acts of personal violence, but solemn obligations carried out on behalf of the state, and as he believed, in accordance with God's will. In April 1924, Greppler signed a contract that effectively made him the sole executioner for northern Germany. He received a regular monthly salary of 136 gold marks, supplemented by fixed fees for each execution and additional payments for his assistants. He adhered to long-established executioner traditions, wearing a white shirt, waistcoat, tailcoat, top hat, and white gloves. His insistence on this ceremonial attire sometimes brought him into conflict with officials who favored a more modern appearance. During the later years of the Weimar Republic, which emerged after the fall of the German Empire in 1918, political debate increasingly questioned the death penalty, and the number of executions declined sharply. Greppler experienced periods of inactivity and financial strain as execution orders became rare. For a time, it appeared that his profession might disappear altogether. This situation changed abruptly in 1933. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. With the consolidation of Nazi power, executions increased significantly. Greppler renewed his annual contract in February 1933, receiving a salary of 1,500 Reichsmarks per year, an equivalent of 11,400 United States dollars today, and a fixed payment of 50 Reichsmarks, an equivalent of 380 US dollars today for each execution. During this period, he sometimes performed the Nazi salute during execution procedures, behaviors that led to official warnings instructing him to refrain from political gestures while carrying out judicial duties. Greppler continued to perform executions throughout the early years of the Nazi regime. In April 1933, he beheaded the murderer Albert Kluge in the city of Zwickau using the hand axe. On the 19th of May 1934, the 66-year-old Greppler carried out the executions of Johnny Detmer, the leader of the so-called Red Marine in Hamburg, along with Alfred Werenberg, Hermann Fischer, and Arthur Schmidt, all convicted communists. An eyewitness later described how the axe was raised and then allowed to fall, before Greppler drew the blade toward himself in a practiced motion, severing the head cleanly. Two of the last executions carried out with hand axe were those of Baroness Benita von Falkenhayn and her friend Renate von Natzmer. Both women had been convicted of espionage and treason by the People's Court and were executed on the 18th of February 1935 at Berlin-Plitzensee prison. The beheadings caused outrage in the foreign press and ultimately led Adolf Hitler to decree that further executions throughout the Reich should be by hanging or the guillotine, effectively ending the use of the axe in German executions. Although Greppler was widely regarded as highly experienced, criticism of his work did eventually emerge. In 1936, concerns were raised after one execution in which the axe struck above the intended point. Alcohol consumption was suspected to have played a role. By 1937, after approximately 30 years of service and at least 144 executions, Greppler was forced into retirement. His pension proved insufficient to support him, and although he was briefly offered a lucrative opportunity to recount his life story abroad, German authorities prevented him from doing so, and likely increased his pension to ensure his silence. One of the most infamous individuals executed by Karl Greppler during his career was Peter Kürten, known to the press as the Vampire of Düsseldorf. Kürten had committed a series of extraordinarily brutal crimes in the late 1920s, including the murder of children and adults through strangulation, stabbing, bludgeoning, and arson. His crimes terrorized the western German city of Düsseldorf and drew national and international attention. The court sentenced him to death, a verdict widely supported by a public horrified by the scale and cruelty of his crimes. On the 2nd of July, 1931, at Cologne's Klingelpitz prison, Karl Greppler carried out Peter Kürten's execution using the guillotine. Within the legal framework of the time, the execution was viewed as the final act of justice imposed on a man responsible for extreme and repeated violence against defenseless victims. Following his retirement in 1937, Greppler lived quietly in Magdeburg. In 1945, after the collapse of Nazi Germany, he was arrested by Soviet military authorities at his residence. The arrest was likely connected to the 1934 executions of communists in Hamburg. Karl Greppler was 77 years old when he died in custody on the 30th of January 1946. Bringing an end to the life of a man who had served as one of Germany's last traditional executioners operating at the intersection of law, ritual, and state violence across two profoundly different political systems.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.